Based on what we know, if this is a possible indictment claiming Comey lied about whether he leaked or authorized a leak of specifically the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration, I don't see where they're going to get it. Politics meets law couldn't be better defined than by what is happening with the possible indictment of James Comey, this administration. And I have been digging deep on this. I have gone back and looked at all of Comey's previous statements to Congress. I have gone back and looked at the Inspector General report that investigated a lot of this. And I am quite certain that there is no there, certainly nothing that would warrant a prosecution for perjury. And you have to remember, perjury requires someone having intentionally lied, in this case to Congress. And we don't know exactly what it is that they are saying Comey lied about, but we've got some pretty good guesses. Now, let's just take a step back here. Let's remember how we got here, right? The U.S. attorney appointed by the Trump administration, a Republican, Eric Siebert, forced out because he would not indict Comey and Letitia James. He and his line prosecutors believed there was not enough evidence to charge him. That wasn't the answer Donald Trump wanted. He then put out on Truth Social that there is a great case to be made against them. And instead, he puts in one of his former attorneys, Lindsay Halligan, in that role. She has no experience as a prosecutor. She is an insurance lawyer. And the only reason it seems she's there is because she's willing, it seems, to try to get an indictment. Meaning, she's corrupt enough to simply do what the president is asking for, regardless of whether there's enough evidence to prove the case. And I say that with a degree of confidence because I know these facts pretty well. And I'm going to read from a very good article, if you're interested in this topic, that goes through all the possibilities. But let's start with what President Trump says about this. I mean, he isn't even pretending that he isn't calling for Comey to be indicted. He has said it publicly on Truth Social. I don't know exactly what he said here, but he said this a few minutes ago when he was meeting with Erdogan from Turkey. Let's listen.
I can't tell you what's going to happen because I don't know. You have very professional people headed up by the Attorney General and Todd Blanche and Lindsay Halligan, who's very smart, good lawyer, very good lawyer. They're going to make a determination. I'm not making that determination. I think I'd be allowed to get involved if I want, but I don't really choose to do so. I can only say that Comey's a bad person. He's a sick person. I think he's a sick guy, actually. He did terrible things at the FBI. But I don't know. I have no idea what's going to happen.
All right, I stand corrected. He's now pretending as if he is not involved in this. And I say pretending because he has inserted himself into this publicly with his comments on Truth Social. Now, there is still the possibility that a grand jury would refuse to indict. We've seen that happen in D.C. with some of the cases, but Eastern District of Virginia, it's less likely a grand jury would not indict. Remember, grand juries tend to go where the prosecutors want them to. It's an exception when they don't. And I will remind you in a moment of a case where they did not prosecute another senior FBI official in the first Trump administration. And even if there is a grand jury indictment, it is still possible that a judge would dismiss the charges. And it is still possible, even if the case goes to trial, that a jury would acquit, as happened with John Durham when he brought two separate cases about false statements to the FBI. In both of those cases, there was an acquittal. Particularly in the second case, it does seem like the guy made statements in connection with a Steele dossier that weren't true, but that wasn't enough for a conviction. And that shows you, again, how hard these cases can be. But again, I don't know that the goal here is to actually get a conviction. I think the goal here is to harass Comey and these other people. And by the way, let me be very clear. If there was evidence, and if there is evidence, I will say, hey, you know what? My bad. Maybe I didn't realize how much evidence they had. But it's a little hard to believe that they're going to find that because this stuff has already been so thoroughly investigated. So let's go through what the possibilities are for what it is James Comey might be indicted in connection with. It's got to be his testimony from September 30th of 2020 before the Senate Judiciary Committee. Why? Because the statute of limitations is 5 years. And there's a reason that they're rushing right now, because September 30th, 2025 is quickly approaching. And they want to make sure they get this in within the statute of limitations. And it seems it's with regard to false statements that they're saying Comey made to Congress. Now, what are the false statements? Well, Catherine Herridge, who's now an independent reporter, used to be at Fox News, she wrote in August, with the newly declassified records via Kash Patel into media leaks and the role of third parties, Director Comey's 2017 testimony to the Senate Judiciary Committee about leaks appears problematic. She also cited another investigation called Tropic Vortex, which dealt with a disclosure to the New York Times that took place sometime in October of 2016 and was investigated by John Durham. Now, that's the first point, is that anything we're talking about was already investigated, right? We're talking about issues that occurred prior to 2020. Comey then testifies about it in 2020. Now, if this is about Tropic Vortex, that has actually nothing to do with either the Trump or Clinton investigations, all right? And the reason that's important is because that was one of the questions that he was asked. And this is Comey talking to Ted Cruz in what many believe is the critical back and forth that could become subject to this perjury indictment. This is number 2.
On May 3rd, 2017, in this committee, Chairman Grassley asked you point blank, quote, have you ever been an anonymous source in news reports about matters relating to the Trump investigation or the Clinton investigation? You responded under oath, quote, never. He then asked you, quote, have you ever authorized someone else at the FBI to be an anonymous source in news reports about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? You responded again under oath, no. Now, as you know, Mr. McCabe, who works for you, has publicly and repeatedly stated that he leaked information to the Wall Street Journal and that you were directly aware of it and that you directly authorized it. Now, what Mr. McCabe is saying and what you testified to this committee cannot both be true. One or the other is false. Who's telling the truth?
I can only speak to my testimony. I stand by what the testimony you summarized that I gave in May of 2017.
So your testimony is you've never authorized anyone to leak. And Mr. McCabe, if he says contrary, is not telling the truth. Is that correct?
Again, I'm not going to characterize Andy's testimony, but mine is the same today.
All right, so let's dig in a little bit on this. First of all, if it relates to this Tropic Vortex, then it didn't actually have to do with either the Clinton or the Trump investigations. And it actually relates to an article headlined, Yahoo said to have aided U.S. email surveillance by adapting spam filter. That appears to be what that article was about. And there was actually an investigation by John Durham of that. We know that came out during one of the cases that John Durham brought and lost in the Michael Sussman trial, when the former FBI General Counsel James Baker testified there had been a leak investigation conducted by Durham. It was related to that story. Baker said he understood, this is from Politico at the time, he understood the disclosure to have been approved in advance by the FBI director and the director of national intelligence, but other witnesses gave conflicting or uncertain accounts. The prosecution and defense also discussed with Baker that he'd been the focus of a separate investigation Durham conducted into an alleged leak that appeared to have involved a 2016 New York Times report about a broad-based email surveillance that Yahoo conducted. So if that's what it's about, then the question about were you a source for the Trump or Clinton investigations is not material. Now, the more likely issue is with regard to the McCabe. And here Cruz is right that McCabe and Comey gave different accounts of an article that was in the Wall Street Journal. But let's remember what that article was about. That was an article about the existence of an FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation. That was about who might have leaked negative information about Hillary Clinton. And that seems to be what this might be about. In response to the article, the Justice Department and the Inspector General opened a probe to determine whether the article had unauthorized disclosures. And I'm going to now read from a very good article in Lawfare called The Situation, Choose Your Own Adventure, the Lindsay Halligan edition, came out yesterday. As the Inspector General report details, Comey and McCabe's accounts of the leaking episode contradicted one another. In his telling, Comey denied authorizing the leak and claimed that he was ignorant of McCabe's own plan to authorize the disclosure. Comey said that his first conversation with McCabe about the leak occurred after the article came out. Comey said, I don't remember exactly how, but I remember some form or fashion that it could have been like, can you believe this crap? How does this stuff get out? But I took from whatever communication we had that he wasn't involved in it. McCabe, on the other hand, said that he told Comey during that meeting that he had authorized the leak. According to McCabe, Comey did not react negatively, just kind of accepted it. Now, first of all, there's no indication, even if you accept McCabe's account, that Comey authorized the leak. It was talking about what might have happened after the leak. But more importantly, the Inspector General found it was McCabe's answers who lacked candor. And I'll quote from the report. The overwhelming weight of that evidence supported Comey's version of the conversation. The Inspector General found that McCabe's claim that he told Comey about the disclosure on October 31st is inconsistent with his statements during earlier interviews, where he had said he had not authorized the disclosure and didn't know who did. Now, here's the real icing on the cake. The Justice Department, under Trump, tried to bring a criminal case against McCabe for his statements about that. So the Inspector General finds it's likely McCabe who's lying or not telling the truth or not accurate. And a grand jury in 2019 refuses to indict him. So can you imagine? They didn't get an indictment against McCabe, but if they're going to now go after the other guy in the conversation, who the IG says the overwhelming evidence seems to indicate he's telling the truth, now do you see why this case is getting so hard? If this is what it's specifically about. But regardless, neither McCabe nor Comey is suggesting that Comey knew about the leaks prior to the article's publication, and that is what the question was to him. Now, there is another possibility related to that question and answer, and that is this guy Dan Richman, who's a law professor, a friend of Comey's. Comey admitted that he turned over to Richman after Trump started claiming that he didn't demand a sort of loyalty oath from Comey in 2017. He handed over his own notes about that meeting to Richman so he'd have them. And Richman was subpoenaed by this office in Virginia when Siebert, the guy who got fired, was the U.S. attorney. The problem is Richman's statements don't appear to have been helpful to prosecutors. Richman later told the interviewing agents Comey never asked him to talk to the media. Quote, Richman claimed Comey never asked him to talk to the media. He certainly did talk on Comey's behalf, but the FBI was never found that he'd been a source for any articles. Most importantly, there is no evidence that Comey had asked him or authorized him to be a source for the story. And then there's another possibility in a back and forth that he had with Lindsey Graham, where Lindsey Graham says, do you recall getting an inquiry from the CI, the intelligence community, in September of 2016 about a concern that the Clinton campaign was going to create a scandal regarding Trump and Russia. I don't, he said. You don't remember getting a lead, and he goes on to say, Peter Strzok, he says, that doesn't ring any bells with me. And this is related to something called an appendix in John Durham's report, which was recently released by Senator Grassley. And the issue here is it was confusing what Graham was asking him about. Meaning, remember, the Russia investigation had been going on since June of 2016. And he's asking, did you get an inquiry that the Clinton campaign was going to create a scandal, as if that was the start of it? The point is, as you dig in to the various statements that were made by Comey, as I have, it's going to be very hard to make a case for perjury, because you have to look specifically at what he's asked, what he answered, and what the evidence is. Because I hear some people saying, well, you know, he admitted he leaked, and so he lied. It's like, no. He admitted he handed over his notes from a meeting with Trump in 2017. And by the way, handing those notes over may have been a violation of protocol, but it's not a crime, because they didn't find that there was any classified information in those notes. There was classified information more broadly in a memo that Comey had written about the meeting, but in terms of the notes he handed over, there weren't. And regardless, that was in 2017, so the statute of limitations would have expired. So you got to find something within the 5 years. It's got to be related to that testimony in 2020. It's got to be related to, were you the source? Have you ever authorized anyone else at the FBI to be a source about the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration? And again, this is something that's already been investigated. So if everything I'm saying is true, and again, we shall see. As I say, I'm always open to having my mind changed, right? Turns out you got something I didn't know about, Inspector General didn't look at, something new, I'm open to it. But as of today, based on what we know, if this is a possible indictment claiming Comey lied about whether he leaked or authorized a leak of specifically the Trump investigation or the Clinton administration, I don't see where they're going to get it. And I'm going to add one more point. And I said this on CNN last night. To all those who claim Comey had it out for Trump, you got to at least admit that, right? Comey had it out for Trump. There are two key facts that belie that completely. A, Comey reopens the Hillary Clinton investigation 11 days before the election. And number two, the FBI and Comey did not leak that there was a Russia investigation of Donald Trump. It didn't get leaked before the election. Comey, the guy who's out to bring down Donald Trump at all costs, can't figure out a way to leak that there's a Russia investigation? The Trump defenders last night, and this is the only response they ever say is, oh, he's trying to cover his tracks. Like, what? Oh, yeah. No. He's thought that it was so clear that Hillary Clinton was going to win that he could put out negative stuff about her, not leak the Russia investigation, and that way he'd seem like he was objective because he didn't think that Trump had a chance of winning. I mean, it is the most convoluted explanation as opposed to the far more obvious explanation, which is Comey was playing it the way that he thought was appropriate. And again, you listen to MSNBC and these people can hardly say the name Comey without anger dripping from their eyeballs. They hate him so much for what they think he did to Hillary Clinton in 2016.